Welcome to Lakewood Ranch Television. Our guest today is Gary Schuster, who makes his home here in Lakewood Ranch. And Gary's had a great career in the media business, in the newspapers and in television and public relations. And Gary, thanks for being with us today. How are you?
Great to be with you. Thanks.
We'll start off a little bit before we talk about how you came to Lakewood Ranch, your career in the newspaper business. It started back in college, didn't it?
Actually, I started in high school as a copy boy for the Detroit News in Detroit, Michigan, and spent about 5.5 or 6 years as a copy boy working in the paper. And then when I got my degree finally from Wayne State University, I went to work out at the Royal Oak Tribune, which was a 6-day-a-week local paper. And I worked there about 2 years. The news called me and said, "Why don't you come back? We're going to start some zone coverage out in the suburbs." And so I went back down to the Detroit News in 1968 and started there reporting generally, and then went, after about 2 years, they sent me up to Lansing, to the state capitol, covered legislature and state government up there and the governor's office, and then became bureau chief up there after 4 years and spent a couple of years doing that, and then they brought me back down to Detroit as the chief assistant city editor and then city editor of the paper, and then news editor of the paper, which basically ran the whole news operation except sports and women's. And stayed there 3 years doing that. Then they sent me to Washington as the Washington bureau chief and White House correspondent. And I stayed there until I went to CBS in 1985.
Newspapers always something that intrigued you as a kid growing up?
Well, you know, I had, like a lot of kids, I had a newspaper route and delivered papers and had that contact. And I worked for the school, did work for the school paper in high school, wrote some things, but it never really grabbed me that was sort of where I was headed until I explored medicine, education, a whole bunch of other majors, and took a journalism course as an elective. Liked it so much because the instructor I had, which you hear so many times, people say instructors mean a lot to their lives. This guy, Jake Heighton, was fabulous, and I spent an extra year in college and got my second degree. I already had a degree in psychology, stayed to get another degree in journalism and art, in liberal arts, and then I left and went out to the Royal Oak Tribune and the News. So
psychology probably a good thing to have in that business.
I'll tell you, it's probably more important than the journalism, to be honest with you. I mean, I just did some census work around here. I've been working for the Census Bureau. And you get wherever you live, you get that territory. So I've been working on Lakewood Ranch. Just the psychology of knocking on doors, asking people questions, filling out things that either they didn't send in or whatever, and sort of, blending in with them and, having them respond to you. And you're in all kinds of situations. The psychology was way more important than the journalism, although I had to go knock on doors as a journalist asking questions too, but I liked it. I liked doing the census work because it took me back to where I sort of grew up. I mean, that was my work.
You worked. You mentioned the city desk for the Detroit News, which was really the kind of the crime beat, right? Local politics.
Well, it's everything. It was the way the Detroit News ran it. The city editor was in charge of the state of Michigan, so it was broader than just the city desk or the city newsroom like in Chicago. Every paper has its own sort of nomenclature and how it runs. But the news was, city editor was state coverage. So I had the state capitol, I had the state. So I had the city, I had the police guys, I had City Hall, the mayor, but I had the mayors of all the little towns. I mean, I had the state of Michigan. So it was a bigger deal than some city desks have.
Who were some of the great characters that you had to deal with in those years? Politicians?
Well, there were politicians.
Sports figures?
Sure, there were politicians. George Romney was governor of Michigan, when I was sort of bumping around doing that. George Wallace came through when he was running for president, covered him. I had the two Giacalone brothers who were mafia supposedly tied guys. Went out and covered some of their arraignments. One of them tried to push me down the stairs. During one of those deals. I had you know, a number of different things. Covered the Detroit Tigers in 1968 when they came back from winning the World Series in the 7th game in St. Louis. And Mickey Lolich and Willie Horton and Al Kaline, all those guys got off the plane. So many people at the airport in Detroit that they had to send the plane to Willow Run, which is an old World War II factory. They used to make planes and things. The plane had to land there because there's too many people at Metropolitan Airport. They didn't want the plane to set down there. But a lot of characters, you know, over the years in Lansing, you know, state senators who were very important, and Coleman Young became mayor of Detroit after he left Lansing as a state senator from Detroit. But I got to know him up there. The athletic director at Michigan State, Jack Breslin. So you get your, you know, that job puts you in a lot of interesting places and a lot of characters to talk to. You know, Jerry Kavanaugh was mayor of Detroit, Vince Brennan, you know, Supreme Court Justices John Swainson, who had been a governor in Michigan for one term, a Democrat, got elected to the Michigan Supreme Court. But you knew them, and you knew them in a lot of different ways. I mean, Jerry Kavanaugh, when he was mayor of Detroit, I went to high school with his brother. So, I mean, you know, when I went to cover Jerry running for Bob Griffin's Senate seat in Washington, I'm riding around his car with him because I knew his brother, and I knew his mother. I knew the family, you know. And so it was a whole different deal. It was a whole different deal with some of them. Yeah.
Now, you did the newspapers for, what, about 15 years before you went to television?
No, it was longer than that, Doug. I think I was with, it was about, I started working in '66, so it was about 20 years.
20 years.
20 years as a reporter with the newspapers and an editor and that kind of thing before I went into television, right.
And